Today I'm going to talk about the 8 components of the entrepreneurship method. And I'm going to apply that to my experience founding DearTomorrow, which is a climate change nonprofit. And some of these steps I came to long before I ever thought of the concept behind DearTomorrow. And some of them I learned along the way. So the first one is identify your desired impact on the world. And this may be something you already know. You might kind of have a feeling of how you want to affect the world, hopefully in a very positive way. Or it might be something that you need to think about and have some time for introspection and self-discovery, or just even trying things out. I came to this already knowing that, ever since I was a little kid, really, I've wanted to work in the environmental field. I've always wanted to work to preserve nature for people and for the plants and the animals as well. So that was something that was kind of already in my pocket. Number 2 is start with the means at hand. And that's something that, you want to think about. What do you already have? What do you already know? What's around you? What are you familiar with? And this is something that, as you'll kind of see with my story, that this really comes together for me in a lot of different ways. I was studying behavioral science, I was studying behavioral economics and environmental economics and policy, and I've been studying climate change and environmental issues for a decade or more before I founded DearTomorrow. And so all of these pieces were coming together, and then crucially, as you'll see in the stories, that I became a parent, and that was another spark moment of change that opened up these kind of new way of looking at things and new pieces, new way that the pieces were fitting together. Number 3 is describe the idea that you have today. So instead of telling you the story of the idea and how I came to it at the moment, inspiration, I'm going to play a interview that I had on Living on Earth, which is a NPR podcast and radio show, and they did a really good job of putting it together, so I'm just going to lean on them and play that story for you now. Even though it's a radio show, I'll maybe add some pretty pictures for your entertainment.
Trisha Shrum says the idea for DearTomorrow flew into her head in 2014, somewhere far above the Atlantic. She was flying home from a climate change conference in Iceland.
At the same conference, there was also Christiana Figueres, the head of the UN climate negotiations. And she gave a talk and ended with this really haunting story that she has this dream where the eyes of these children who are living in the future are looking at her and saying, "You knew about climate change. What did you do about it?" And thinking about how that drives her and how that's really what keeps her going and doing so many incredible things, leading the climate negotiations, something kind of clicked for me. And on the way back from that trip, I was thinking about my daughter, who was 10 months old. It was the first time I'd been away from her. What would I say to her? What would I say to her now? And how could I capture this moment of how I feel today about climate change in 2016 in a way that she can relate to when she is my age? So I opened up my laptop and I wrote a letter to her. "Dear Eleanor, you are not yet a year old, and I love you dearly." And the idea was that she was going to read it. I was going to send it to her in the year 2050. "I'm on a plane right now watching the sunset for 4 hours as we chase it through the sky." And it was just writing in just a very honest, open way of everything that I've been doing on climate change. I have been driven by the climate change problem for quite a few years now. The times I've struggled to feel like I was powerful enough or that what I did really mattered enough to keep going. In 2009, we all hoped that we would reach an international agreement in Copenhagen, and the negotiations failed. I became so discouraged, I stopped believing it was possible to come to a global agreement on climate change. And just realizing that all of that work and all the things that we do on climate change, suddenly, with my own daughter, it was very clear who I was working for. I don't know what the climate will look like in the year 2050. I think you'll have a very different coastline. Many animals will be gone. The coral reefs are probably gone. The coral reefs are beautiful. Your father especially loves snorkeling. We went snorkeling on our honeymoon in Thailand and saw beautiful creatures of all colors and unlikely shapes. When you're old enough to hold on to the memory, I'll take you snorkeling so you can see them for yourself and tell your kids about them. And the moment that was probably the most powerful was when I was kind of almost giving my excuses as to why I hadn't maybe gone as far or full in on climate change as I could have. I've tried, but to be honest, I haven't tried all that hard. Instead, I've focused on my own life. I fell in love with your father and got married and had you. Normal, beautiful things. But I stopped trying so hard and, saying like it's so big, I'm so small, it's so hard. And when you try to give excuses to your child about why you didn't protect their future and why you didn't enable the best possible world for them, that you could, those excuses just fall flat. You can't excuse yourself from your responsibility as a parent. And now I'm beginning to see that for you, I need to try harder than ever before. And I started to think, maybe if this is so powerful of a moment for me, if we could get other people to come in and write a letter or think about climate change from the perspective of this is part of the legacy that I'm leaving for my kid, then that would be a way to really connect to people. I love nature so much. It's been my sanctuary and my church and my playground ever since I was a little girl. And I want you to have that. I want you to have the opportunity to enjoy the beauties and the fruits of the world I knew. It is such a beautiful world. I love you dearly, my sweet daughter. You are so small, so innocent, so beautiful. For you and for everyone else, I will try harder. All my love, Mama. Number 4, calculate affordable loss. So this is an interesting thing. This is why sometimes I tell people right out of college is actually a pretty great time to try to start a venture of some kind, because your affordable loss is not as high as it will be if you have a family and a mortgage and daycare bills and all these boring things that you tend to or possibly have in your 30s and 40s. You can afford to lose a little bit more when you're just at the beginning. So don't let inexperience stop you from moving forward. For me, I was in my PhD, and it just so happened that my 3 years long project had just crashed and burned in the most terrible way. That was really, really terrible. Just sucked. It literally. And I was almost thinking, do I even want to do academia? Is this even for me? I have to start basically from square one with my dissertation. And so at the moment, I kind of felt like I didn't have a whole lot to lose. I was feeling more disengaged with the process of my dissertation, and I happened to have some advisors who weren't paying that close attention to what I was doing with my time. So I kind of just took a year and spent most of my time developing this concept. And I was a PhD student, and I was married, and I was able to have, I was still teaching, having some income, and doing this with most of the rest of my time. So it just happened that I was at a point in my life where I could just take the time to see how this idea might go. Number 5, take small action. This is the first step to make it real. It's just something to get the ball rolling. And for Dear Tomorrow, I remember when we made our very first website, and it was just on Wix. I'd never made a website, never done anything like that before. And it was really just a landing page with a name, but it made it feel real, and it started the ball rolling. Small steps lead to bigger steps. Number 6, network and enroll others in your journey. This basically just means talk to people about your idea. Talk to people about it, tell them about it, tell them your vision, hopefully get them excited. But even sometimes the negative conversations, the ones where we got feedback that maybe didn't feel so great, people thinking that wasn't going to work or there was some big flaw, those were really useful too. We didn't, fortunately had a balance of, positive feedback alongside the negative feedback. But the negative feedback helped us understand how to improve, and the positive feedback helped us build a network of support and early stage fans and early stage funders. And really the key thing with the networking and sharing your idea is you take so many half-an-hour meetings. You email people and say, hey, here's this idea I have. Do you have 30 minutes to talk? You tell them about it. You talk about it. You get feedback. You hear what they have to say. And you ask at the end of the conversation, is there anyone else that, you might be able to provide some feedback or might be interested in this idea? Could you make an introduction? And that is where you start to build that network, and you start to find those people out there who are aligned with the work that you're doing. Even if you might consider them as competitors, they can also be collaborators. So this is a really, really important part that you'll learn so much. It also helps you hone your pitch when you talk about your idea all the time to anyone who will listen. Number 7, build on what you learn. Now, this is all about learning from your early stage attempts instead of worrying about failing and packing up and going home. You're going to fail lots, and it's fine. It's better to fail early and small than to fail later and spectacularly on a grand stage. Someone once told me, when they told me that they weren't going to write a big fat check that they could have written for us, they told me that, sometimes having a major funding opportunity early on is actually bad for startups, because then all that extra money hides all the mistakes that they're making, and they don't learn from the mistakes, and they don't figure out how to make their idea better, how to make it work better. So test, learn, figure it out. With DearTomorrow, we started off just by asking everyone we knew. We had a network of I think 300 people that we invited to write a DearTomorrow letter. And then we figured out the next step and the next step. And we learned a lot, and there's been a lot of pivots, and I'll continue to talk about this as we move forward through this class. But learning, there's going to be a lot of it. Embrace it, and don't feel like it says don't feel like those mistakes say that you're not cut out for whatever it is that you're trying to make happen. Number 8, reflect and be honest with yourself. So there's always going to come a time where you just decide that you might be done. And you might be thinking, is it time to quit? Maybe you're out of money. Maybe you are about to, take out another loan or another credit card debt, and you're just thinking, is this too much? Or maybe you've just decided that what you're doing is no longer what you want to do. And this is where it goes back to that impact statement of saying, what is it that I want to bring to this world? What is it that I want to do? And you might find that after you create your first venture, or after you create whatever venture it is you're on, you might realize it's time to move on. And that's okay. It's not failure to choose to do something else, whether or not your baby, goes on without you or not. I got really lucky with that with DearTomorrow, because I had a co-founder, Jill Cubitt, who's amazing, and she, came on really early stage and has built DearTomorrow. We worked alongside one another in the early stages, and then I decided at one point it was really choosing between academia and research and running a nonprofit, and I chose academia and research for a lot of reasons. But it really comes back to that impact statement of what do I have? What skills do I have? What do I want to do with my time? And, this is it. So this is my dream job. I never necessarily wanted to run a nonprofit and do the constant fundraising and do all these things. It was just something that grew out of this idea that I wanted to bring into the world. And so for me, I feel like it worked out great as an exit. I'm still an advisor to DearTomorrow, but it's not what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I have a co-founder who has carried on. She's the director. It's now like, she's built so much more of the project than what I had done at the beginning. So it's been great, and that's kind of a really nice outcome, I guess. That's kind of the best of all possible worlds, I suppose. But even if it's not the best of all possible worlds when you have an exit, the most important thing is that you're honest with yourself, and you just assess, like, is this venture working for me? Is it working for what I want to do in this world and how I want to make those changes? And if you keep asking those questions, you'll be just fine. Peace.